Okay, we're back for the Data Value Show for the latest edition. And today we're going to be talking about streaming, so when to stream. So I'd like to welcome our next guest, Paul Dudley, to the show. Hey, Paul.
Hey, Chris.
How you doing?
Yeah, good.
Well, thank you very much for agreeing to come on the show. And I know it wasn't loads of notice I gave you as well. I think it was only last week that we chased up. We had a slot free. But yeah, background. I think I met you initially at one of our meetups we did in London a good few years ago now, a couple of years ago at least.
Yeah.
And yeah, you've made the big move to America and gone to the West Coast. I haven't gone quite as far. I'm on the East Coast, but yeah. So I'm glad things are going really well with Streamkap. So would you like to share with the audience a bit of background yourself and what Streamkap do?
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, as you mentioned, we met over in London. I was living in London for some time, and it's where I met my now co-founder. I went to go work for him at a data company that he started, and then we did a batch ETL company together, which we sold. And then in the context of both of those companies, we kind of ran into folks doing streaming, generally building their own stuff with Kafka, spending months getting to production data pipelines, and we felt like it didn't have to be that hard, and so that's really what we set out to do was Streamkap was make streaming a lot easier, an experience that people are more familiar with, like with batch ETL tools like what we built at Gravity or Fivetran, for example.
Yep.
But have it be streaming under the hood, and so that's really what we've done at Streamkap, and particularly for us today, we focus a lot on change data capture as and databases as the main data sources.
And that's quite a good entry point as well into the first sort of like topic really is people talk about streaming, and batch is quite familiar. Everyone understands batch, mini batch as well. It's quite well understood. The term streaming, and people use real time streaming sometimes interchangeably. So when you give that classification of streaming, what's that encapsulate?
Yeah, I mean, for us, like we're built on Kafka, so we're true event driven, streaming that we're doing. But I think what's important is that a lot of what we end up doing is, starting with a natively streaming source like a change log on a database or an event source, and just deciding, like in the context of a traditional data architecture, not to slow that down.
Yep.
Just because that's the way that your ETL tool works, right? And so that opens up a lot of opportunities. So we're, like I say, we're doing true event driven streaming within our system. But like the context in which we're operating is usually within a data platform where somebody is streaming the data into Snowflake or Databricks or ClickHouse or something like that, right? Which are not streaming, right? They're doing some kind of in the case ClickHouse is real time, but like there's some kind of batch based processing there. And I think what's interesting and worked out really well around the timing in which we started Streamkap was one, that there was like this kind of growth in real-time databases like ClickHouse, but more importantly that Snowflake launched Snowpipe streaming around the same time that we started Streamkap, and there's sort of similar offerings from Databricks and BigQuery, but Snowpipe streaming in particular like became a really advantageous way to get data into Snowflake. So all of a sudden, if you could get your data streaming, that was like a cheaper way to get data in. Like it's a separate serverless process in Snowflake, and it's depending a little some caveats, but generally it's the cheapest way to get data in.
Yep.
And it's low latency, and then it doesn't mean that like every process that you do downstream needs to be low latency, but just means that all of a sudden like there's really very low barriers to getting low latency data into Snowflake, and then you can decide basically just within Snowflake how fast you want to move things, and within the constraints of what Snowflake can do.
And I think I've got two thoughts from that one. Is one, there's other use cases that we can talk about, because obviously we're Snowflake, we focus on Snowflake, but just that's one use case I think for streaming. We can focus on the ones. But while we're on the Snowflake topic, and we just spoke briefly before the show on this, was people deciding when they go real time, when they don't go real time, and and not understanding what use cases that data may be used for, could muddy the water of like whether to actually go real time or not. And as we were just saying earlier, is there's nothing wrong with if you can get something real time, take it real time, stage it, and then you can use it at the appropriate time that's needed. So there's no point slowing things down, I think, with your words as well.
Yeah.
So have you seen that sort of movement a bit more, where people are thinking, oh, it costs me no more to do this, I might as well just go with this event-based streaming approach myself?
Yeah. And I think actually like a good framing is sort of like maybe the historical view on this, right? Is like, you have a business user who says, I need a real-time dashboard. And then, you go and ask them like, what does that mean to you? And they're like, oh, every hour or something, right? Or you push on them and like, how often you're going to look at it? It's every hour. And I think that kind of aligns to what we've seen, which is that like, for the most part, like you're not using low latency data for dashboards that like, traditional BI type dashboards. I mean, there are exceptions to that, but it's unusual. And so usually the reason why, I mean, I'd say 80% of our customers come to us because they have some low latency requirement that's fairly explicit. Generally, that's something that's customer facing or operational, the data in Snowflake or ClickHouse, what have you, is being used by some downstream service, which we can talk about that a little bit. But I think just like the high level is that, you have, some demand that actually is, like I say, low latency. Generally, it's not real time if they're using Snowflake, because you have constraints of like, you can get down to a couple of minutes, something like that. But for now, anyways, tough to do faster than that. But I think they're working on it. That's kind of how we tend to see things. And but the interesting thing about that is that, to your point, if it's actually less expensive to load it in streaming, then just having it there effectively as like a staging layer, there's no reason not to do that. And then you can just decide for different use cases, like how fast do you want to go? And for dashboards, it might still be, it's every hour, but now it's less expensive to get the data in every hour.
You may have referential integrity. It means that it's no use until you actually get all these things all lined up. There's some shout out to some of the people out there. So some usual suspects: hi Val, hi John, hi Hervey as well. I'm not sure, I don't think we've met before, but picking up on John's comment here, which is depends on the business is real time. And I think first we need to break that. Yes, 100% that. But first of all, the business need to understand what they mean by real time when they ask for real time. Because as John was saying there's probably very few companies that really need real time, unless you're a trading company or something like that. You'll probably need near real time in most other cases, and minute, 2 minute, things like that. They're probably sufficient latency or time delay for most what people would call real time, near real time use cases.
Yeah, I think part of it too is like there's this bleeding, but like, traditionally, let's say you had like maybe some of the low latency stuff was being driven by, software development teams. It didn't really touch the data team perhaps as much. And they might be the ones who stood up Kafka and ran a, full event-driven architecture for microservices, something like that. But what we've seen is there's sort of blending a little bit where, there's a data team that serves, might serve BI, but they also are working with the product team. And so the data that they're putting together, in Snowflake or what have you, is then serving some operational use cases, as Val is pointing out in the comments there. And I think that's where you tend to see, right? If there's another automated system downstream, then all of a sudden that latency matters, and that system can consume that data, immediately if you make it available, right? And so that's really where we see like the most of this stuff, right? Like it tends to be, let's say it's customer facing analytics in SaaS, or the personalization in e-commerce, right? Where if you can do that in real time and show that customer the right product next while they're on the website in a session, right? There's a very meaningful impact for them. And similarly in like logistics, right? There's some criticality of that time associated with the data. financial services, there's a ton of stuff there, not just trading, but also like fraud detection. We work with folks in payments and a number of fintech companies where they do actually need the data in real time. And I think we've started to see a little bit of this, but one of the things that I think we'll see more of as this stuff gets easier, both with services like Streamkap, but also just as like Snowflake gets better. I mean, dynamic tables is continuing to improve as a functionality within Snowflake that can give you low latency data modeling and that's cost competitive. And that all of a sudden you kind of have this Jevons paradox is a really thing that people love talking about right now with AI, but I think it applies to this kind of thing, right? As things become cheaper and easier, then all of a sudden you find more use cases for them, and I think we'll see that more. I mean, again, that doesn't necessarily mean your internal dashboards, but it might be that at some point, like if that's just cost competitive and there's no real downside, then you can just do it. Now there's some real constraints to that, which is getting a little bit outside of our media area, but if you look at Fivetran, a bunch of their businesses like connecting to HubSpot and other like API data sources, and they're those are not, for the most part, not batch sources, right? So you're only going to go as fast as your upstream
as the APIs can take you on those ones.
Yeah.
Val's put a comment in. Well, so good a comment, it went twice. I must have pressed the button twice. But operational analytics are really good use cases of streaming data, and it's a really good point because the term operational analytics prior to streaming days was normally analytics that was run either on a read-only copy or an operational data store, which is replicating data from your core application. Always, well, that would be the ideal solution, but a lot of the time they were just reports that were stuck on your actual operation systems. And so the term operational analytics and using that now for analytics that's being performed on data that's in flight, streaming across, is I suppose is another area that I know Kafka supports that. I assume you can support that with, is it KSQL? I think it's got, is it
yeah, they've got KSQL DB. Although Kafka or Confluent, I should say, is they seem to be moving more towards, not seem to be, they are clearly moving the direction of Flink. They bought a company called Enrich a couple of years ago that was like a managed Flink provider that was some of the original developers of the Flink Apache project, and they're pretty heavy onto Flink as the analytical engine, and we also use Flink. So it's it's an open source project. Lots of people use that. It's it's pretty popular, but it's also pretty hard to manage. And so that's I think the problem. And all the cloud providers who are working around that are trying to help make that easier. And so for us, it's actually rolling out this this week to some of our customers, the self-serve side of that stuff. We've been doing transformations for customers for some time, but we're starting to do that. I would say, I guess maybe I should make a distinction there. You can do a lot with Flink, including analytical stuff. Thus far, we've mostly seen sort of transformation workloads within Flink in the stream, but yeah, you can also use it for certain analytics.
It was interesting. Well, one of the things I had on my list of things to talk about was data transformations, and I think years ago, I think I was talking about something called RTL, replicate, transform, load. So you replicate the data, do some transformations on the fly. It never picked, that acronym never picked up, even though reverse ETL did. How dare they? I mean, RTL was much better, but I mean the concept behind it, and I think the current environment may be moving towards that way, is we've been living in this ELT world for quite a while now. We always push the data down, transformation done in the application, underlying database. With the move to Iceberg and open file format, there is no database to push down to now. You've just got the file format.
Yeah.
So whereas before it always made sense to push it to that, now I think there's a point where, there's two sorts of transformation groups we've got. I've got transformation that needs either bulk transformation or transformation that or transformation that needs to happen just with the context of data I've got. So, I can make I understand any rules that are needed just from what's coming in on that packet of data, whereas other ones I may need to join it to other things to go and perform other transformation. If it is the one where you can do these things on the fly, you're already paying for this compute. The data's already flying through it. It makes sense now to perform any maybe LEIT transformation, intra-event transformation, or maybe some quality checks as well.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I mean, it's interesting. Like, you had this as a part of the transition from ETL to ELT. There was a lot of sort of bashing ETL as a process that I think was actually like problems with the technology more so than like the concept, right? And so it was brittle, it was opaque, it was expensive, but I don't think that those things are necessarily inherent to ETL as a like concept. It was just that was the way it worked with the technology that existed.
There was no chance of the DBAs wouldn't let you put all that workload down to it because they were already. We didn't have the teasers back then. We didn't have the Teradatas back then. We didn't have those appliances, the Exadatas. The database was it was probably normally running hot anyway. So you need a balance where you had that and application servers were much cheaper than scaling a database. To go and buy a bigger box is going to cost you millions, whereas you could add more ETL compute.
So I mean, there's definitely some arguments that for ELT that persist, right? Like saving all your, having all of your data available if you want to use it downstream in the future or something like that. But there's definitely things that are just more efficient to do in the stream or in process. Not to be streaming, I guess, but like in process as and
on the fly.
Yeah, as you're saying, right? Like if you have something that can be contained within that single message. We see this a lot where you want to mask some data for privacy reasons. You want to drop some columns from the message. This kind of stuff. Or even we see one of the common workloads we see for transformations, both at a single message and for some heavier stuff, is unnesting semi-structured data, basically getting it in the right shape for whatever the destination is. Which in our case, oftentimes that's like ClickHouse and Postgres destinations where, if you're coming from like a semi-structured source like MongoDB and you're going into ClickHouse, you're going to Postgres, those are strongly typed. You really need to get the data cleaned up in order for just to be compatible with that destination. But that's also just a more efficient way, even in the context of Snowflake, which could handle it, might just be more efficient to do it in the stream rather than doing it in the data warehouse, which I think Val's commented as well. So you can do those in memory. And sometimes that's also one of the things that I've been kind of surprised by as we're rolling out our streaming transformations is we have a lot of customers who are doing, effectively ELT on Snowflake. And my general assumption was that for the most part, like they would not want to move that into the stream. But we've started to see more interest in that than I was anticipating. And I think it comes down to that concept where there's some things that are just going to be more efficient, and and people are looking at their costs and sorry, when I say efficient, cost efficient and time latency, right?
Yeah. So it probably leads on to the other one because we've been talking about ingesting data into Snowflake, and it is probably the majority of the use cases out there are in that either to a data platform or a database.
Yeah.
But there's the point-to-point integration. So there's and now with the world of analytics now coming much more closer to the operational side, where you are having you are a real-time business. You are making you're doing maybe adjusted dynamic pricing based on information coming in. You're maybe doing custom pricing based on who the customer is as well, and customization of the customer journey they're going on based on who they are. And having accurate information. No one wants to go and sign up to just go to get the elite status or premium status of a for a particular boutique or shop or something, and then realize when they go there, the card's not registered yet, or it's not showing as they haven't got these gift vouchers that they've just received. not a good customer experience. So
yeah,
do you see Streamkap being used, or streaming being used to connect different systems together? I might even use John Cook's sort of analogy of like, they're helping dogs, with any data object graphs, of moving data to, or collecting data from different places, or being able to share data between different business processes that need.
Yeah. I think we are seeing that. I mean, we're mostly doing database to database, so we're kind of constrained within that. Oh, well, that's not entirely true. We're either doing just like pure events or database to database. So one thing we haven't yet delved into is APIs, and kind of, because one of the things we actually, like when we started, it still remains a thing that we're thinking about, is like, you mentioned reverse ETL, that's sort of like, I don't know, it's kind of an anti-pattern, right? Like you have all of these like hops across different batch systems to get to this end state, and I think there's a real opportunity there with doing that on the stream, but it's not something we've yet built out, right? Because then you need different destinations and things like that. But I think there is a lot of opportunity there. But definitely we've seen that kind of thing within going from different database to different database with different services, going from all variety of things, right? So one of the things that actually I've been kind of thinking about, how do we position around this, but like that we started to see as a pattern is like, we offer, like I said, it's Kafka under the hood, but like the experience initially can be very similar to just like any other batch ETL tool. You're connecting a source and a destination, so it's very much about those connections. But what we've started to see is that people then, they can use Streamkap like managed Kafka, and we've seen a lot of people are interested in that. We're like, actually, okay, yes, we're getting this CDC data, and we do want it to go to Snowflake, but actually there's this other service that could use this data too. And so let's just read that from Kafka and go to that service. Or we have another service that could write into Kafka, and it'd be useful to have all that data in Snowflake. And so we are starting to see more of that. And I think maybe the element that I think is slightly different from like your classic event-driven stuff that you do if you're building your own Kafka infrastructure is there you're kind of building up from the bottom, and you're saying like, I need a pure end-to-end like event-driven architecture, and that's great, right? But there's a lot to that, and I think what's going to happen is that you'll see folks who don't really have the team maybe to build that or the capacity to build that kind of thing, but if they start with an easier to tackle architecture and they can build down from that, it gives them access to some of the advantages without having to like re-architect their whole system, and allows them to kind of get into it a lot more easily than they might otherwise.
I'm going to go back to that reverse ETL. It's sort of like an observation. I've been thinking about it. It's sort of like disappeared. I think you did call it an anti-pattern. I do remember. I think I did a post a while ago, and it had an Aston Martin convertible and an Aston Martin standard non-convertible. I said, when you need an excuse to buy two products, one to drive the one car to work and drive a different car to on the way back. It's like I've got an ETL tool driving it in, I've got an ETL tool taking it out. It never made sense to me from a how could this have even existed until you step back and you look at the target market and okay, so for reverse ETL, you're targeting a marketing team that they got access to this certain data, but they haven't got the ability or IT support or to go and build something themselves to go and transfer that data across, or write their own APIs for this stuff. And again, that anti-pattern thing is you end up using a whole warehouse and the time it takes to process it through your natural layers for something that you really want to be driving something as quick as possible. You don't want your marketing system to have data that's 6, 7, 8 hours out a day. You want it to be as real time as possible. So I think what was being done with those reverse ETLs, I think there's an opportunity, I think, to have some streaming tools that can do this all in the fly and just bypass, landing that data into maybe that stream picks up some data from Snowflake that it needs, but Snowflake's not on the critical path for it.
Yeah.
It's never going to have that full, well, not easily, and that's not its sweet spot. Not easy to have that full that low latency end-to-end integration piece.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think like I do understand how reverse ETL evolved because you had people already sending data into Snowflake. But I think, yeah, as you say, right, I think there's an opportunity that like maybe that's not the end state, and there's an opportunity to continue to improve on that concept and say, okay, maybe that we don't need to hop through 3 different batch systems to get back into like activation layer, right? And do it more efficiently with lower latency. Yeah.
So the file format wars that we've got at the moment, and for any of those old enough, we've been here before with VHS and Betamax. If you go back that far, or then after that was Blu-ray or DVD. Which
I'm an HD DVD guy. I got a huge collection.
And there were different reasons, and you can probably have linked some sort of characteristics to each of those ones. Each of them supported by one particular manufacturer. I think Sony was the Betamax one, and I think Panasonic, or maybe anyway another one which was championing the other one. And the same thing happened again when you went to the Blu-ray or DVD. And I won't go into I think I did an old post about this. We won't go into the details of why each one won there, but the world we're in now, you've got Delta, we've got Iceberg, we've got Huddy, is it pronounced?
Huddy, I think.
Yeah, that just sounds like a early for me, but
well, I think that for better or for worse, you're not going to have to learn how to pronounce Huddy all that much because I don't think they lost. So
you think so?
I don't know. I mean, look, my sense of it is like it is very strange right now, right? Because you have like this sort of semi-artificial designation of Iceberg as the winner, right? And like when I say semi-artificial, it's like before you get really broad market adoption, right? Like Iceberg, a lot of this stuff came out of the kind of big tech, right? And at that scale, you really have to do it, right? And both Huddy and Iceberg were like, we're coming out of the constraints that the big tech companies are working in the scale of data that they operate on. There's obviously parallels to HDFS there as well. Then it's obviously got very competitive last year, and Snowflake was all in on Iceberg. I think they saw the writing on the wall that they had to commit to something, and then I don't know if it was a snow ice thing. No, just kidding. But then when Databricks bought Tabular, they just sort of said like, okay, like we're going to back Iceberg, and if Databricks and Snowflake are both going to support Iceberg, then all of a sudden, it's decided, right? And Confluent was in the mix there too, with support for Iceberg earlier before the Tabular acquisition. But that was just sort of like the final, like, the final, what's the word? I don't know. This statement that was going to be, but it's interesting because like I think it's like collectively as an industry, and I think from a vendor side of things, it's like super clear that Iceberg is going to win, right, or has won.
Yeah,
but it's not because like there are more companies, or maybe there are, but it's not like the bulk of the industry from a customer side has adopted Iceberg, right? It's still quite early, I think, in terms of like industry, adoption of it, right? So I think,
well, from experience recently, we've been working with some clients. Databricks doesn't make it easy if you want to use Iceberg. So you lose a lot of the ability to use the exact details of Unity Catalog, I believe, or tags don't get recognized, or vice versa. So you still have this. Not all the vendors are supporting it all equally. So then you have this sort of, I go down this route, I can't use this. I go down this route, I can't use that. Which gives me the more pain? And unfortunately, we're having to deal with that because of the format wars. If everyone agreed on the format and supported it completely, or supported the roadmap to support it completely, I think there'd be a little bit less confusion, and people could just focus on getting something done. Yeah, I wonder why.
Yeah, interesting. Because right, like the whole spirit of it, like the value prop from like a data org perspective, for a user of Iceberg is like, if I deploy Iceberg, then I can use any compute I want, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not paying for proprietary storage.
Yeah.
And that's the vision of that is, it's fantastic, right? That opens up a lot of opportunity, but like the practical application it's just, it's very early. So, and so there might be that there's limited support, if we give the most possible credit to vendors, that their limited support is just because it's so early. But there's also, some incentives there that they it's not good for.
We'll give them the benefit of the doubt, and that's I like your spirit there. But I'm sure there's nothing else in it. It's just
but that's the even if that is the case, right? We're still early, and then it is in their interest to try and keep it within their walled garden, right? And it's sort of uses Iceberg, but actually there's some limitation, and it means you can't use another.
It makes sense, and there's always going to be that it's this commercial aspect of the world, I suppose.
So I think we will get there, right? But if you want, if you want to deliver the sort of the ideal Iceberg deployment today, I don't think it's not very easy, right? And so then it has to come in how much are you spending on Snowflake? And if you're spending $10 million a year on Snowflake, then you can hire a few people or a team to go figure this stuff out and manage your own catalog and all this stuff. But if you're not, then all of a sudden you want to spend $1 million a year to save
exactly. Is the juice worth the squeeze? Is my favorite phrase. There's too much of that technology magpie effect. I've got to go and do this, but is it really worth the money? Are the business going to be happy we burnt a load of money doing this? So it's really. Have you used Xtable yet? Have you seen this as a new format?
No. I mean, I think I've heard it around, but
it's a new Apache project. I think it's in incubating stage. I don't know what that actually means, but it allows. It provides that sort of ability to go to whatever format is underneath. So you can have an Xtable.
Is that their project?
I don't know if it was. I'm just looking there. Apache
is they had a
value to operate cross tables between Apache Hoodie, Delta Lake, and Apache Iceberg.
Yeah, I don't know, but maybe so. Yeah, that's it. I met some of the One House guys. Maybe it was a couple of years ago, but I remember had some more in-depth conversations with them spring of last year.
Yeah.
And that sounds really interesting, right? Because one of the constraints for adoption of open table formats earlier last year was not only was everything we were just talking about Iceberg, but it compounded by the fact that you didn't even know what the most which format to go with, right? So I think Iceberg was already more popular than Hoodie, but Hoodie had some advantages and or has still, but it just seems unlikely Hoodie gets broad adoption now because there's so much momentum behind Iceberg. But anyway, what OneHouse and Xtable, I think it is related. It is a compelling value prop where all of a sudden you don't have to worry about that decision so much, and then you just But I don't know. I'm not sure in a world where everybody mostly agrees that Iceberg is the way that it's going to go.
Yeah,
I'm not sure how important that is anymore.
True. I mean, it is. It's something being put in to fix something that's been created. It's not as if you went out and designed this stuff up front. Let's have something that can convert from multiple different formats. You just have the one format in the first place.
It's interesting. I mean, I think there's another problem probably that occurs, right? Let's say actually we solve the problems, which I'm sure we will. Where it's catalogs get easier to use, you kind of there's a more of a clear hierarchy of what's the best ones to use, and I think there's a couple maybe we need another version of Iceberg before it really is ready. Some of the stuff that's coming for Iceberg I think will make it easier to manage and more usable for a broader set of people. So I think it is moving in the right direction in general, and maybe obviously, but then you all of a sudden if that's true, then you have okay, I can use whatever query engine I want in theory, but will you? how do you decide? Like, I think that's an interesting area where I think there's a lot of opportunity, because like in like the sort of golden path scenario there, right? Like you just dump all your data in Iceberg, and then you sort of can magically choose the right tool for the job that's most efficient or what have you, right? But in practice, if you look at the world today, I think the more likely scenario is like you have Iceberg, and then you still just use Snowflake for most of your compute, or you still use Databricks for most of your compute, because like choosing how to allocate jobs to different compute engines is like complicated, right? So
I was about to say you have to build another product play.
There's a whole other layer
that actually tells you where to go and put this stuff too. And I think the other thing it's missing is the complexity of the security. So okay, what compute can have access to what data, and then who has access to what compute? So you've now created another layer of complexity to manage your security, which opens up more complexity, more risk, and also maybe slowing down, more friction as well. So it slows you down each time you have to go and release something, or because you've got to check. You've got to check even more security, more tests to check that your security is working.
So I don't know if that's already a sort of deficiency for, I think, Iceberg today, right? Is like, just the level of control that you have over access is a lot more. Like you just, it doesn't support like row-based access control, and so
tag-based
services that do on top of it.
Yeah, a shout out to Ryan. He said he just made it. You missed all the good stuff, Ryan, but I'm sure there's some more left. And then Val's said he had to run, but he still can't keep away because he still has. So I thought he'd gone, but what is it? You don't need to. You don't need to stage data and stuff. You can process it in flight. Yeah, I think that was we agreed on that one earlier.
Yeah.
So so we've covered, and shame that John's gone, because it's probably a favorite topic of his as well. Is we talked just before about business processes and this concept of and I've never heard of this before, so I'm not going to pretend I know about it. Forward deployed engineers. So do you want to unpack that?
This is something that has come up in a couple of I had heard of it, but I don't know. Somehow it's been like popping up in my world a lot more in the last month or so. And so forward deployed engineer is like a critical role at Palantir. And I think Palantir has been very successful as a sort of AI company, right? And whatever criticism you may have about their technology or what have you, like they've clearly done well in the market, and I think they've done very well in government workloads. I think it's not as clear to me how well they're doing in corporate, but I think the thing that they unquestionably do well is they develop these ontologies. It's understanding the business, and they do that with these forward deployed engineers, where there's basically a software engineer who goes and is sitting in the company and understanding what they do, and that concept is not wholly new, but they call it something different, right? But what I found is really interesting about that is that there's this. And I brought it up in the context of a newsletter I wrote. I'll promote my newsletter quickly. Maybe I should have done this earlier, but
hit the button.
But I was writing last week about semantic layers and like kind of making the connection to ontology. It's not the same thing, right? But like relations, there's some relations there of like, for AI to work, you really need to understand the business, and you need to be able to like translate into something that your LLMs can consume and understand, and like traditional like data models are not sufficient for that, right? And that's so they're great at text, but not so great at like understanding some arbitrarily named table in Snowflake or whatever, right? And so anyway, this concept of forward deployed engineers like has been very successful at Palantir. By the way, Palantir has like a very high rate of like founders of their ex-employees becoming founders, and I think there's some argument that this forward deployed engineer is kind of like a reason for that, because you have somebody who's technical who has to go in and learn business, and that's like a powerful combo to become a founder. Anyway, that was just an aside. But I think it's interesting is that OpenAI has started hiring for folks last year with that title, and this morning Mistral announced that they did a 100 million euro deal with some big French like transport company. That several year deal, and critically, that included in that deal is forward deployed engineers. So just like you're seeing this thing, I think this is going to be my newsletter this week. Is like humans are important for AI, right? Like at least for now. The way that we're going to actually get enterprise like AI deployments, like outside of just some application or calling the API, is that like there's somebody who is embedded and understands the business, understands that, and is able to like create the kind of framework, whether it's ontology or semantic layer, or what have you, that then can be consumed by the AI.
It's a minstrel, because I haven't heard of. Well, a minstrel was a traveling musician. Was the term.
Mistral. It's the French AI company Mistral.
Okay, so I've got it. Yep, minstrel AI. Yeah,
they're they were famous for having raised like 200 million euros with like a slide deck. But fair play. I mean, they seem to be doing well, right? They're like the Europe native AI company. Frontier model company. So
look out for those guys. Yeah. So I mean, the name, I hadn't heard the name, but the concept of having someone embedded in the business to understand what's going on and define the business processes, it's not new, and I think it's a positive sign. Because for a while we've been we've had that disconnection between the business and data teams or IT teams, and if now we've actually got rather than it being called a product owner or a CDO or a chief evangelist officer or whatever of these things we've tried to solve it, I think this is quite a clearly defined role. I'm here to make this to work with your business processes. It'd be interesting to see how different that is from a product manager or that product sort of approach, because I suppose it's a different lens, isn't it, really? So one's looking at processes and one's looking at like features. So maybe it's just that next layer up, extension.
Yeah, it's a good question actually, because I think there's definitely like shared elements for sure, right? And maybe the difference in part is just that like this is sort of by definition an external person, and so like maybe you just need to call it somebody else, whereas like product manager, at least in my view, tends to be like an internal role, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know, like the naming I'm less caught up on, but I think that to your point, and this this concept has existed for a long time, right? Like you're in consulting, you deploy people to go help get stuff done within businesses, right? So Brian said, right, is the FDE just the California way of saying consultant? Which I think that may 100% be what it is, but it's interesting. Like I think maybe the only interesting insight there is just like for AI to be successful, like you need consultants on the ground. Actually, there's another data point on this, which is like Accenture is one of the biggest benefactors so far of AI, because they've booked, I can't remember how much it was, over $1 billion of revenue.
I saw that. I sent that to the board.
Yeah.
But look at the budget this year. So there you
go. Which kind of, I don't know. The other thing, like taking things down to a lower level, just in conversations I've had recently about like enterprise adoption. Like I think it's one thing to like start using ChatGPT. It's one thing to start using like a code assistant, right? Those things are very easy to adopt. But like building your own AI workflows is just a whole nother animal. And I think what I'm hearing, somewhat anecdotally, is that like those things are just moving very slow, and partly because like businesses don't really know what to do in some cases, or which problems they can solve with it, which they can't. Like it's moving very fast. And so you say like, okay, I'm going to build this, like if I build the state of the art architecture today, like, and it takes me 6 months to deploy that, the state of the art is going to be completely different in 6 months. And like, what do I do? Right. So I don't know, I'm hearing from folks that they're like picking off, like enterprises are generally picking off easier, smaller things, or that have a much shorter like time to ROI, because they're like, okay, I can confidently build around this because I know it's going to deliver results in a few weeks or a month or something like that. But like the bigger projects are a lot harder to invest because you just you have no idea like what the world's like.
That forward I mean, this is probably another lens of that forward deployment engineer is, you know what your product does. You can go, you're the best person to find something in the business and go, I know I can do that easy. All right, I know that we can nail that, and you've already got me the data. I've already in this place here. So I think that's again something that's missing. Is between us like. We like building stuff, building the platform. It's not like, okay, what do we need just now? I think I've just in time is what you need. Okay, what just enough and just in time. So what's going to get me, the maximum return with the minimum investment of time and effort? And I think that is definitely the way to go. I just had we'll see what we can probably bring some other things up. Another topic maybe or thought. And this whole shift left. The shift left, I did a post the other day. It was an old stick shift, the old gearbox. Yeah. It's not about shifting left. It's about shifting up, down, left, right, depending on what corner you're in. I think what the reason why I brought that up is, shifting left for a data quality. Yes, we do need to do it. But the more we shift left and then wait for that to be fixed until we do it, the slower we're going to achieving. So yes, we do need to push that way, but we also need to be pragmatic and just shift as left as possible for now, but then later on move it further. So quality within Stream. So what quality checks do you think could be moved further up and validated, and then have real-time alerts or even rejecting data before it's even made it to the platform? Do you think that's the route we'll be going?
I think it is. I mean, for two reasons, right? Like, one is you have an opportunity to do that in the stream. So that means like you don't then get through a bunch of like, you don't run some big batch process that then finds that one, that one issue. And if you're doing lower latency stuff, there's more criticality around it, right? Like if it is, powering a downstream, automated, then all of a sudden, like having that low quality data or bad data or a failure happen, like it's, right away, and it's a problem, right? So, and generally, this is casting broad net, but like generally what we're, stuff we're doing is product. It's in a product. It's like has, a lot of, we have SLAs around it. Like it's really important that like, we deliver. And so, I mean, we've done, I guess I can speak about what we've done, and then that's not the whole world of what you could do. Yeah. But I mean, I think we've done the more like sort of quantitative stuff. Like, does this source match the destination? Like, have we lost any route? I mean, we have like, guaranteed delivery. So we're, confident that we're going to get the data there. If there's, or if something goes into the dead letter queue, we'll alert you if that's happening. But, or if there's an issue on the source side. So I think we cover all the bases of like the kind of technical side of things. And then there's like another layer of that above that, which is the anomaly detection. So, there could be other, issues maybe upstream, but you're saying like, oh, this source, normally like is pretty consistent. And right now it dropped off, where like, some sources might actually be, the upstream service for them is like kind of spiky, right? So that's all stuff that we kind of have a pretty good handle on today. I think there are softer data quality stuff that we haven't yet built that I think is interesting, and maybe stuff that is better served if we get a more dedicated data quality service in the loop of that system, rather than something necessarily that we built. But yeah, I think there is a huge opportunity there if you can make that assessment on like a per message level. Then you're not, like I say, you're not running some big batch process that's expensive downstream and finding out like, oh, hey, we have this small subset of data that's a problem, and now all of a sudden that like expensive.
It's a good point. It's the different classification of data quality, because it's data degradation, as I like to call it. Is it's got worse over time, but gradually, which less likely we're going to pick up in a stream. But I suppose you could have data degradation intraday. So, you've had fluctuation. Oh, hold on. And that could highlight that, you've got an application server or something on there that's got the wrong version of it. And, it can highlight that before you really pollute your data lake or your lake house or whatever you want to call it. You're a persisted copy of all that data, because then you're in the data correction realm. You've got to go back and correct this stuff. So yeah, I think there's I do support. We do need to. I call it a data quality firewall in the past before the shift left sort of thing. And you need that quality firewall as close to the source as possible. And anything we can do to encourage that, but I don't think we should wait for that data to be perfect before we start doing stuff, because we'll be waiting for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I was talking to a customer the other day, and they were they were critical of Fivetran schema handling, which is very similar to what we do, by the way, which is I think at an ETL layer, the thing that what gets positioned as schema, people handling schema drift is that your pipelines don't break when the schema changes, right? Which is good, sort of. And I think it's important to be able to support that, which again we do. Fivetran does it. I think most folks do that. But the thing that misses is that and this goes back to the shift left and kind of classic problems, which is for example, let's say a data type changes in a column. And so our systems will handle that and create a new column with a new data type. Great. We didn't break. But your DBT model in Snowflake is still going to break.
So this is where we've shifted left, but then after that, now we need to shift right to solve the thing we shifted left with.
So, and that's there's different ways you can handle that. I mean, one of the things we do, we do have some solutions for that in the context I mentioned earlier, where we're if we're coming from MongoDB into Postgres, that Postgres destination is not going to be tolerant of the variability in data type that you have in Mongo. And so part of what we're doing in the stream there is it is, that's a kind of shifting left, right? So we're bringing some of the processing into the stream, and we're saying okay, we're gonna automatically change these data types into the correct one that is supported by the destination. And you can imagine that you could do that same kind of thing in the context of more traditional ELT, where you're okay, we're going to guarantee that
we're going to pull that common mapping into the same field. So I mean, you can stick it into a variant. The variant will have a version on it. This variant, this file. This JSON file that's in that variant has a particular version of that one. I know that one has an extra node on it, or that one's changed. Boom. It requires a bit of design, doesn't it? And we unfortunately, we do a bit of knee-jerk stuff, and we don't think about these changes sometimes. I like that approach. It's quite a neat approach of we'll deal with the left issues and the right issues.
I mean, Joe Reese wrote about that. I think partly following up the Shift Left conference.
Yeah, well, I think I saw that the Shift Left conference. I saw his post, and I thought of my gear stick thing. So
it's Shift Left and right. So
exactly.
Nice.
So my thought is you're on a racetrack with your different gears. So you're shifting left, but when you're on a certain corner, you're shifting right on the lane. But and I think it's probably another doing consulting working with our clients. Not everyone needs everything at the same time, and again, being a consultant, you say depends. You can carve out what's right for that company at that point of the journey, and having that pragmatism approach and not maybe a purist approach. So it's you can carve away what's the right technology you need at this point that allows you to pivot if you need to, or up the game at another level. At another stage. And definitely in this world we're now, where it's moving quickly, these technologies. So you don't get locked into a particular path that's going to cost you too much later. But the one is that path good enough for you for now and providing enough value? If it is, don't let it ride its course, and then you can invest more at a later date, but you've already got something that's providing some value.
For sure. I was just I'll send you this cartoon. I was chatting with somebody in the comments of their LinkedIn post. They had automated they're like part of their renewals for their customers by like they have an LLM bot doing some like chat support, and then they like Michael Jorgalis is the guy, and he created an extension of that bot that just like summarizes all the tickets that happened in the last year or whatever, and then includes that in a presentation for the renewal. And anyway, we were chatting about how far you might go with that, and then I don't know if you're familiar with XKCD, the comic, but they have a lot of like kind of very some technical and just good. Anyway, it's a good comic.
Yeah.
Like one of the things that he posts is like the matrix of like of how much effort to spend on something based on how much time you spend on it, right? Like,
yeah.
And it's like, okay, if you do something once a year and it takes you a day, like you can't actually justify spending all that much money making that more efficient because you only do it once a year. So it might be painful while you're doing it, but like, don't go spend, a month building something that saves you a day a year, right?
I did I used very similar content. I hadn't heard of this, but I'd a friction scale that was weighted by frequency, which is pretty much the same thing. Okay, what's the time complex? So friction is the time complexity and effort to perform an activity. And then if you get the time complexity, and then how often do you need to perform that activity? Use the two of those things as a weighted score of what you work on. It clearly says, right, I don't automate my my infrastructure for the firewall stuff because I do it once a quarter. But what I do is I automate the creation of my semantic layer because it changes daily. Yeah. And I also the effort to do it as well. Yeah. But yeah, it's interesting. I'll have to check that out.
I'll send you a link to that post because it's I think it's the kind of thing you're like, I'd like to put this in a slide for it's good to have in a slide for that's a conversation you can have a lot, right?
It keeps the focus on the right area, doesn't it? It's the right it's the right thing. So we got a question from Ryan again. Okay. All right, yeah. So we have been a speed run. We'll have to get you on the show soon, Ryan. We can reminisce about Cognos stuff. So I know that's a favourite topic for us. And also we need to congratulate Ryan for getting the photo of the year award or something like that. I think he was used on some marketing because he was seen at one of the events with his head in his hand.
Oh,
I'm not sure the background behind it, but I'm sure he'll share with us at some stage.
Yeah. I do know the background, but I know maybe not the full background, but yeah, basically, like, you know, what is it? I should know this is Data Council.
Yeah.
So that's coming up in a couple of weeks here in Oakland and Bay Area, and then the guy who runs that saw Ryan's post at Gartner, the Gartner conference, and he used that as some convenient marketing for how his conference is not like Gartner.
Yeah, you said that. Well, yeah, it looks like I'm gonna have Ryan on the show. He can share.
He can tell us what was his frustrations from Gartner Summit.
We've all had those moments. We've had to have our head in our head, our hand in our heads, head on our head. Anyway, so I think we're pretty much on. We're coming up to the hour. So for people that want to meet up with you, catch up, I know you do a monthly meetup in the Bay Area. So do you want to give a bit of background about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do a low-key happy hour inspired by, in part by you in London and Ethan, Aaron, obviously. Tony Fracture and I host that here every month. We got one coming up the 21st in San Francisco. And generally it's on a Tuesday every month. So give me a follow on LinkedIn. I post about it and I'll have the link for the Luma. But yeah, generally I'm quite active on LinkedIn. So, whatever we've got going on, whether it's the Loki happy hour or Streamkap, then, I'll be talking about it on LinkedIn.
Yeah. Well, I hope to catch up with you at the Snowflake Summit in San Francisco, which I think is in your stomping ground. So we can have a chance to, catch up and have a face-to-face then. And yeah, so on the same note, I'm not doing my shout out for my meetup. I got one next on the 23rd. Tomorrow is the Wednesday, 23rd of April. We do ours monthly as well, but normally the last full week of the month is when it is.
Can attest for the quality of the folks there. So Yeah, if you're in London.
Thank you very much. You know, you're one of the the founding attendees. You know, you were missed when you moved across to America. So Val and John, you know, they're
holding down the fort.
They're holding on to it, and they're keeping the strength. They're always there. And I think so next show, I don't know who's on next. We've got some people. We've got Jessica Townsend coming on soon. I think Ramona's coming on soon. We're getting booked up. We're getting booked up. So it's got some good guests coming up. So thank you for everyone that listened today. Make sure you subscribe to Paul's newsletter. I haven't yet, but I will. And if you're in the Bay Area, check out his meetups. So thank you, everyone. And thanks for all the comments. All right, we'll call that a wrap.